Okay, we're continuing on our notes on Great Britain and how it became a power. And the picture that you have in your text and that is showing for you right now shows the reason why. The Navy. Britain's merchant and military fleets were second to none in the world. And traditionally, Britain has always had a strong navy. That is the prized gem of their military, the Royal Navy. They needed a navy. Why? They're an island. They needed a navy for protection, and then they needed a navy to expand. So their merchant fleet, backed by the Royal Navy military fleet, it allows them to create a vast trading network throughout the world. And a big part of this was used to trade and maintain communication with the North American colonies that were in the eastern part of the present-day United States. This is a port at Charleston. It's a picture of a port at Charleston, South Carolina, and you can see the British flag is here, the Union Jack. And there was a phrase that's made into a famous song, in England at least, "Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the sea." And that is the basis of their power. Now this is a picture of George III, and again, they become a global power by this time. By the time George III takes over Britain, the king's power had regained power. The king's power, he was trying to make it regain power because it had been diminished under the Glorious Revolution. He was determined to try to put his stamp on it. And in many ways he was successful, and it wasn't a bad thing, because Parliament sometimes needed to work with the king, but if the king had no backbone, they're not working with anybody, and sometimes the king had a different view. So the idea that George was actually very capable in doing was in making sure his will became part of the discussion with Parliament, and that it wasn't just Parliament making the decisions without the, again, cooperation and collaboration of the king. Since George III's time, the monarch's power has diminished again. It's more of an advisory and consulting role, but on occasion, the current queen will put her mind into things, and it can be helpful. It's good to have different perspectives. These are people who study things. They want to make sure that the traditions of England, of Great Britain, are maintained. George III, again, is considered kind of a villain and a poor king. He let America go by Americans, by historians worldwide, and by many historians of Great Britain. He's considered a very strong king because what he does everywhere else, and he's very effective in that. So he's not a horrible king. We just didn't like him that much. By 1750, the Great Britain has created a series of prosperous colonies all over the world, and particularly in North America. Large cities that are famous today: Boston, New York City, Philadelphia. These are all cities, and they have great ports, and they become huge parts of the trade network. Charleston, Savannah are other large cities that are important today with shipping, and they were large ports. Wilmington, North Carolina would be another one. So these ports link England, Great Britain, to the West Indies, to Africa, and to all of Europe. And shipbuilding became a huge industry in the United States. I grew up in New York, as you all know, and I grew up on Long Island. Well, Long Island had many ports, and shipping and whaling and trade were huge parts. Here are some of the examples of the towns that were close by me, where I lived. You have Port Washington, Port Jefferson, Greenport, Jamesport. So you have all these ports all up and down the coastline of Long Island, which has numerous places for ships to deep water ports where ships can land and trade can unload. And then what would happen is they would use trails and they would take them to New York City, which of course has a huge port. So the shipping industry is the key to British success in the Americas. They had a great navy, and then of course on the ground they would have small garrisons of the Royal Army or the Redcoats. So this is what the North America looks like in the mid-18th century. This is at the time of the French and Indian War, after the war. This part here, all this part here, was French. And what happened was, well, for the most part, this was Spanish, but the French had taken it over, or Spain had gave it over to the Americas. This was area that was under English control, but not really settled, and they had really limited the settling of this area. Partly was because of their feeling toward the indigenous people here, and partly because they wanted to make sure they could maintain the colonies. They would say, well, we want to make sure we protect the rights of the native people. Partly true. They also wanted to make sure they had strict control, so they limited their growth along the port line. They didn't want to get too far out in here. This part is Spanish territory, but it is ceded over to France, and then later on will be taken by the Americans when Napoleon makes the deal, the Louisiana Purchase. So what do they have in common? Well, that's a good question. So what do all these maps have in common, or the colonies have in common? Well, and these again are the colonies that are official colonies of England. Is a big factor that they have in common when you look at here and you look at here. There's one big factor that comes out. So you can go ahead and you can look at geography and maybe write your answer down in here, what you think the right answer is. We're going to stop right here. This is lecture 2. Now we might get through this on the first day or the second day, but we will be doing a series of lectures about 6 minutes each, and we are at the time that we have to stop. So have a great day. Thank you.